Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and today we're returning to the case files of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes in our adaptation of The Final Problem, in which the famed consulting detective goes head-to-head with Professor Moriarty, the so-called Napoleon of crime. So sit back and enjoy as we transport you to the streets of Victorian London here on BeFM Drama. It is with a heavy heart that I take up my pen to write these, the last words, in which I shall ever record the singular gifts by which my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes was distinguished. In an incoherent and, as I deeply feel, an entirely inadequate fashion, I have endeavored to give some account of my strange experiences in his company, from the chance which first brought us together up until the present day. It was my intention to have stopped there and to have said nothing of that event which has created a void in my life which the lapse of 2 years has done little to fill. My hand has been forced, however, by the recent letters in which Colonel James Moriarty defends the memory of his brother, and I have no choice but to lay the facts before the public exactly as they occurred. I alone know the absolute truth of the matter, and I am satisfied that the time has come when no good purpose is to be served by its suppression. As far as I know, there have been only 3 accounts in the public press, that in the Journal de Genève on May 6, 1891, the Reuters Dispatch in the English papers on May 7th, and finally the recent letter to which I have alluded. Of these, the first and second were extremely condensed, while the last is, as I shall now show, an absolute perversion of the facts. It lies with me to tell, for the first time, what really took place between Professor Moriarty and Mr. Sherlock Holmes. It may be remembered that after my marriage and my subsequent start in private practice, the very intimate relations which had existed between Holmes and myself became to some extent modified. He still came to me from time to time when he desired a companion in his investigations, but these occasions grew more and more seldom, until I find that in the year 1890 there are only 3 cases of which I retain any record. During the winter of that year and the early spring of 1891, I saw in the papers that he had been engaged by the French government upon a matter of supreme importance, and I received 2 notes from Holmes, dated from Narbonne and from Nimes, from which I gathered that his stay in France was likely to be a long one. It was with some surprise, therefore, that I saw him walk into my consulting room upon the evening of the 24th of April. It struck me that he was looking even paler and thinner than usual. He answered my look rather than my words.
Yes, I have been using myself up rather too freely. I have been a little pressed of late. Have you any objection to my closing your shutters?
The only light in the room came from the lamp upon the table at which I had been reading. Holmes edged his way around the wall, flung the shutters closed, and bolted them securely. You are afraid of something?
Well, I am.
Of what?
Of air guns.
My dear Holmes, what do you mean?
I think you know me well enough, Watson, to understand that I am by no means a nervous man. At the same time, it is stupidity rather than courage to refuse to recognize danger when it comes close upon you. Might I trouble you for a match?
He drew in the smoke of his cigarette as if the soothing influence was grateful to him.
I must apologize for calling so late, and I must further beg of you to be so unconventional as to allow me to eventually leave your house by scrambling over the back garden wall.
But what does it all mean? He held out his hand, and I saw in the light of the lamp that 2 of his knuckles were burst and bleeding.
It is not an airy nothing, you see. On the contrary, it is solid enough for a man to break his hand on. Is Mrs. Watson in?
She is away upon a visit.
Indeed, you're alone.
Quite.
Then it makes it the easier for me to propose that you should come away with me for the week to the continent.
Where?
Oh, anywhere, it's all the same to me.
There was something very strange in all this. It was not Holmes's nature to take an aimless holiday, and something about his pale, worn face told me that his nerves were at their highest tension. He saw the question in my eyes, and, putting his fingertips together and his elbows upon his knees, he explained the situation.
You have probably never heard of Professor Moriarty?
Never.
Aye, there's the genius and the wonder of the thing. The man pervades London, and no one has heard of him. That's what puts him on a pinnacle in the records of crime. I tell you, Watson, in all seriousness, that if I could beat that man, if I could free society of him, I should feel that my own career had reached its summit, and that I should be prepared to turn to some more placid line in life. Between ourselves, the recent cases in which I have been of assistance to the royal family of Scandinavia and to the French Republic have left me in such a position that I could continue to live in the quiet fashion which is most congenial to me, and to concentrate my attention upon my chemical researches. But I could not rest, Watson. I could not sit quietly in my chair if I thought that such a man as Professor Moriarty were walking the streets of London unchallenged.
What has he done, then?
His career has been an extraordinary one. A man of good birth and excellent education, endowed by nature with a phenomenal mathematical faculty. At the age of 21, he wrote a treatise upon binomial theorem, which became popular in Europe. On the strength of it, he won the mathematical chair at one of our smaller universities and had, to all appearances, a most brilliant career before him, but the man had tendencies of the most diabolical kind. A criminal strain ran in his blood, which, instead of being modified, was increased and rendered infinitely more dangerous by his extraordinary mental powers. Dark rumors gathered round him in the university town, and eventually he was compelled to resign his chair and come down to London, where he set up as an army coach. So much is known to the world, but what I am telling you now is what I have myself discovered. As you are aware, Watson, there is no one who knows the higher criminal world of London so well as I do. For years past, I have continually been conscious of some power, a deep organizing power which forever stands in the way of law and throws its shield over the wrongdoer. Again and again, in cases of the most varying kind, forgeries, robberies, murders, I have felt the presence of this force, and I have deduced its action in many crimes in which I have not been personally consulted. For years I have endeavored to break through the veil which shrouded it, and at last the time has come when I seized my thread and followed it until it led me, after 1,000 cunning windings, to ex-Professor Moriarty of mathematical celebrity. He is the Napoleon of crime, Watson. He is the organizer of half that is evil and nearly all that is undetected in this great city. He is a genius, a philosopher, an abstract thinker. He has a brain of the first order. He sits motionless like a spider in the center of its web, but that web has 1,000 radiations, and he knows well every quiver of each of them. He does little himself. He only plans, but his agents are numerous and splendidly organized. If there is a crime to be done, a paper to be abstracted, we will say a house to be rifled, a man to be removed, the word is passed over to the professor. The matter is organized and carried out. The agent may be caught. In that case, money is found for his bail or his defense. But the central power which uses the agent is never caught, never so much as suspected. But this was the organization which I deduced, Watson, and which I devoted my whole energy to exposing and breaking up.
And so, we come to the end of the first episode in our adaptation of The Final Problem. Sherlock Holmes has identified his greatest ever threat, a villainous mastermind operating at the center of a vast criminal network, a sinister intellect of a match for his own, towards whom the great detective has devoted all of his powers. Holmes is a brilliant detective and an unparalleled master of the deductive arts, but even he may be out of his depth in the confrontation with Professor Moriarty. What steps has Holmes taken to undermine Moriarty's criminal infrastructure? And why has he appeared so late at night and visibly afraid in the consulting room of his old friend, Dr. Watson, with his knuckles bleeding and a strong desire to have the shutters closed? Find out tomorrow evening in part 2 of The Final Problem here on BeFM Drama.